Okay. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Suzanne Grossman, and I direct career services at the Marxe School. With my colleague, our assistant director, Samantha Bruno, is here. And we're very pleased to have three Marxe alumni who are current or recent fellows in the Presidential Management Fellows Program, and they're going to talk to us about what the program is like. We'll do that in the first part, and then we'll talk about the application process in the second part, and then we'll open up for questions. So thanks everybody for being here. So our three speakers are just in order on my screen. There's Anna Chung, there's Eric Markowicz, and there's Alora Tassi. And so we're going to hear from each of them a little bit about what degree did they have at Marxe, when did they start the fellowship, where are they placed, and a little bit about the work that they're doing to start us off. And I'll start with Anna first. Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, my name is Anna Chung. I'm currently at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I graduated from the Marxe MPA program I walked in May of 2023, but I think I finished in December of 2022. And I studied policy analysis and evaluation. What was the last part of that question, Suzanne? Sorry.
When did you start the PMF fellowship? And then what kind of work are you doing? Like some project examples.
Yep, great. So I started my fellowship in October of 2023. So I'm the 2023 cohort. And I work on a variety of different projects. I'm kind of in the HUD front office, so to speak. So I work with a lot of external stakeholders. That can be everything from congressional representatives to clients that work that are HUD assisted. But I've been doing a lot of work on the nexus of health and housing, as well as climate resiliency and disaster preparedness for HUD communities.
Great, thank you. And then Eric.
Yeah, hello everyone. Eric Markowicz here. I was class of December 2021. I graduated with a Master's of International Affairs. My focus was trade policy. I believe, in class of 2022 for the PMF. I have 1 month left in the program. I work at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. I am what is called a red teamer. So the way it works is you pretend to be the bad guys to help the good guys. I can't really get much more specific than that, but it's kind of cool stuff. I'll leave it at that and pass it on.
Thank you. Alora?
Hey everyone, I'm Alora. I graduated from Baruch in 2018 with an MPA and started the PMF program in May of 2021. So I'm now a PMF alum. I converted from the program last year and I'm still at my same job. I am an investigator with the Employee Benefits Security Administration, which is an agency within the Department of Labor. And I basically regulate health insurance companies. So I investigate health insurance companies and plans to see if they're complying with the law. And in instances where they are not, which is most of them, work with them to come into compliance.
Thank you. Maybe we'll stay with you, Alora, since you've now done the whole program and converted to a full-time role. Tell us, have you ever worked in government before? And then also tell us about the PMF program and what are some of the best things about it or surprising, or what did you gain from it? Just like give us your pitch about, why students should be interested in this program.
Yeah, sure. So no, I had not worked in government before. I worked for several nonprofits, mostly in the kind of education and child advocacy space. I worked in communications for close to 10 years, and then really wanted to make a change, was really interested in government, and had been applying to a lot of federal government jobs and just had no luck. And so when I found out about the PMF program, I actually applied twice. The first year I didn't get it. And then I applied again the second year, kind of, thinking I didn't get it last year. Why would I get it this year? And the second time I ended up being successful. And truly, like, it really has been a life-changing program for me. I've had so many opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise if I had just come into the federal government on a sort of traditional pathway. I got to do a fellowship in the Secretary's Office of the Department of Labor. I had the chance to brief him on health insurance related issues, which was really, really exciting. I got to do kind of a lot of leadership development stuff that I wouldn't have necessarily had access to without the program. And I also enjoyed that for me, I was a fellow and I did get a lot of training, but I was very much like a full-time employee and got to do, the same sorts of things that the rest of my colleagues were doing. So it is a fellowship and there are really great growth opportunities, but it's also like a full-time job. You're not an intern, you're not getting coffee, you're very much in the work and doing the work, which is something that I really appreciated about the program.
And are you in DC now?
Yes. So I was in New York previously and I did relocate for the fellowship to DC.
Got it. Great, thank you. Eric, same question. Have you ever done any government work before? Was this your first opportunity? And what have been the positive aspects of the program for you?
Yeah, so this is also my first time working for government, either federal or local or state. And to echo what Alora said, that really has been a life-changing experience. I've got to do a lot of really cool stuff that I would never have thought I would have done, like even a few years ago. It's been pretty great. As part of the PMF program, you do a development rotation into a different office. I did mine into the Department of State's Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations and wound up getting to go to Korea to help organize a tabletop exercise, which was pretty cool stuff. That's something I never ever thought I'd wind up doing, and it's probably the coolest thing I've done professionally. There's a whole bunch of other cool things, like specific on-the-job trainings that I wouldn't have done otherwise. I've gotten to take courses. The type of work I do at the moment is neat and serves a higher purpose in a way I never really thought I'd be able to do before. So overall, really positive for sure.
And did you also end up relocating right away?
Yeah, so I remained up in the Hudson Valley for a few months and then eventually wound up moving down. So yeah, I'm down in the DC area as well.
Great, thank you. And we'll talk about location again in a little bit. Anna.
Yeah, sorry, can you restate the question?
Sure. What was your previous background before the fellowship, and have you ever worked in government? And then what are some of the positive, you're the newest fellow in the program, but you've been there a year. So what are some of the positives? Like, what's your pitch on why someone should consider applying?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I'm here in the office and there's a lot going on. Yeah, so I had not worked in government prior to this. And as others have said, it really is a life-changing experience. It's such a great career accelerator. I had worked in nonprofit for about 10 years and also kind of wanted to make that pivot to government work. It was really kind of, I applied almost on a whim, thinking like, I'm not going to get it, but let me just like see what happens. And I did get it. And I, yeah, really, really appreciated the opportunity. Basically, you come in at either a GS 9, 11, or 12, and then you typically have a ladder position that you level up each year. And so for that reason, it is such a great career accelerator. I really love some of the trainings that have been offered for PMFs. Some of them are only available to PMFs, and I think that that is a unique opportunity as well. But as others have said, you're fully integrated into the department, you're a full-time employee, and so you're also doing the things that your colleagues are doing. It's a really great opportunity.
And where are you located now?
I'm actually located in New York, in the New York regional office for HUD.
Because sometimes that comes up as questions for any of the three of you. Do you have any comments on like where have you seen PMFs end up? And I know that one of our alums who's usually at this talk, Megan Gavin, that she's a remote worker, fully remote at her agency, and I think is in New York. So yeah, any comments for people who might be wondering, like, do I need to relocate to DC, or like where are all the, because basically, yeah, maybe one of you can explain like the placement process, like you become a finalist.
We lost your audio, Suzanne.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was saying, if someone could explain the process after you become a finalist, like how do you secure your goal so they understand that you're not just automatically given a location to be a fellow at, and that where are some of the locations that people can end up?
I can start. So basically the way it works is you become a finalist and then you basically have access to this like portal that has jobs that are exclusively for PMFs. And so you can, and it's all across the government, all sorts of agencies post in there. And so you can log into the portal, see what kinds of jobs are posted, see what the location is, whether they're remote or not, whether they offer telework or not. And then you apply to the ones you're interested in. So for me, I was open to a couple of different cities. My partner works in tech, so I interviewed for some jobs in San Francisco. I interviewed for jobs in New York, and then also applied to jobs in DC and ended up, getting a job in DC and relocating down here. Like it's very agency specific. My agency has field offices in 10 locations across the country. So we have an office in New York, San Francisco, Seattle, DC, obviously, Philly, Boston, Dallas, and a couple of other cities. So, and I think a lot of agencies are the same, sort of headquartered in DC, but have field offices all over the country. So I will say, if you are open to moving to DC, you're probably going to have more opportunities than if you're not. But if you're not open to DC, or if you're looking for another city, I always found plenty of jobs sort of in regions all over the place. I don't know, Eric and Anna, if you guys have had a similar experience or not. You've been through the process more recently.
Yeah, I would concur with that by and large. There are certainly more opportunities in the capital region. With that said, I interviewed for several positions that were fully remote. One of them was at the International Trade Administration. Now, keep in mind that was, 2 years ago at this point, or a year and a half ago, something like that. So it might have changed, but at the time, there was a decent mix of in-person versus remote versus different locations around the country, depending upon what you were applying to and what your career goals are.
Yeah, I would say that that's still true. When finalists were announced, I believe it was in February of 2023, there was an initial huge sort of push of job opportunities on the PMF job application portal that Alora mentioned. And a lot of them were in DC, but there were some in other places. But as time went on, more jobs were posted for around the country, actually. So I would also say, like, if you happen to be a finalist and you don't find something you like in that initial push, like, it's not over. And Yes, absolutely. There are jobs around the country, whether that's in field offices or some agencies actually have their primary headquarters outside of DC. I think CDC's is in Atlanta, for example. And then there are also some remote positions or, jobs where telework is an option. I would say some of that is changing. I think my year was the last year for most jobs at CDC that you could be remote. And so, some of this is developing as agencies are figuring out back to office. And so, always ask that question if you are applying for a job and you're a finalist.
Thank you. I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions from students or alumni about the program itself. Anything you're wondering about, anything we've talked about or something we haven't talked about, you can raise your hand and unmute, or you can put it in the chat. Grace.
So my question, I guess, is for everyone, which is, did you come into the program with a target or multiple target agencies that you were looking at? Or I know that for some of you it was like a career path change. So did you have a target, or did you go in sort of more broadly looking to expand your horizons?
I'm going to say something that Megan Gavin, I feel like, always says, or at least she told me. If you make it to the finalist stage, the best thing that you can do is to be as open as possible. And so, yeah, I definitely had a few agencies I was more interested in working at, but I think it's best to apply broadly, and you're actually more qualified for a lot of positions than you think you probably are going into it. And you could find yourself doing really interesting work at an agency that you never intended to apply to. I have a background more in food and housing insecurity. So I was really interested in working at like USAID. But I ended up working at HUD, which is still related to housing insecurity. And that was, it's been a great fit and allowed me to stay in New York. The other thing I would say is if you can be as open as possible to location, that'll serve you well.
Yeah, I would echo that. I had sort of no idea what I was going to do when I became a finalist, and sort of just cast a really, really broad net and applied to all sorts of different things. And I'll echo what Anna said about like being more qualified for a job than you think you are. My current job, I enforce a law that I didn't know existed until I interviewed for the job and was Googling it like 10 minutes before the interview. And I absolutely love it. So, and, I was really interested in health policy and thought, I'll probably end up at like the CDC, and didn't even realize that there was a, whole agency within the Department of Labor dealing with health insurance. So, I think there are definitely folks who, want to work at the CDC, want to work at the Defense Department. But I personally, for me, like Anna, I cast a really broad net, didn't know where I would end up, but ended up finding a really good fit for me.
For me, it's broadly similar. I would say there's like an overarching objective or goal, which I would assume is sort of similar for you too. And then things tend to zig or zag on your way to that goal, and that requires flexibility. And you should apply to all of the things and say yes until there is a reason to say no. And the more open you are, the better it will be. Once you're in the federal government system, it is way, way easier to move around in it than it is to get in the first place. The USA Jobs black box HR calculator is far less preferable than getting in through the PMF program. So if you have an opportunity, probably take it. But also, no, kind of like what Anna was saying, there will be the initial jobs that are posted like day one, and you hop on and you're like, oh my God, that's it. And then like 5 months later, there's a whole other gigantic tranche of jobs that are just appear. And so just because you see the initial ones doesn't mean there won't be other cool ones as well, and don't limit yourself.
All right, thank you guys. That's a good peek into the process.
A couple of questions in the chat. Nicole asked, what are some attributes that contributed to you becoming finalists in your opinion? I mean, to me, it seems very random. Like I could never guess in advance who's going to be a finalist because we have like 30 or 40 students or alums apply every year. And then what is it, like 6,000 or 7,000 apply nationally, and there's for 600 or 700 spots. So, but yeah, any thoughts on what you think made the difference for you?
I'll start this one. So on the PMF portal, it'll tell you the different steps that you have to take going through the process, and attached to each step, there are instructions on how to get through that step. My approach was I read the instructions and I followed them to the letter. And I would guess some combination of that and whatever my grades were at Baruch probably got me over. I don't think my resume was all that great. I was self-employed and I hadn't written a resume in like forever, so my resume kind of sucked. But I mean, if I had to guess, that other stuff is what got me in. Don't quote me on that though.
Yeah, so I would say I see there's a question in here about what the difference was for me between the first year and the second year. And the first thing I'll say is that the process to get in now is a little bit different. I think Anna will talk about that in a little bit, but there's now a semifinalist stage with an interview before you get to the finalist stage. I did not have to do the interview, so my process did look a little bit different. But I basically took what a fellow PMF called like a personality test, it felt like. Like there's sort of this long test. I think you have a couple hours to do it. And it asks you all sorts of questions. The one that always sticks out in my mind is like your manager takes you to a baseball game and puts beer on her personal credit or on her company credit card. What do you do? Things like that. And I think the first time I took the test, I was trying to think, okay, how do they want me to answer? And the second time I was kind of just like, screw it. I'm just going to answer the way that I feel like I would, like what's true to me. And I honestly think that that might have been the difference, was that I was truly just sort of answering the way that I felt like I would truly respond in those situations. And the second thing was that I was just a lot more prepared the second time because I had been through the first round. I knew what to expect. I took it a little bit more seriously. Like got a good sleep the night before, all the things that you kind of do, in your school test taking life. I applied to the second time. And I think that that helped me a lot too. So I will say, I would strongly encourage applying the first kind of time that you're eligible. And if you don't get it, it's really good preparation to apply again the next year.
Yeah, I'm not, to be honest, I'm also not exactly sure. And I do feel like the process can be a little bit opaque. So I would say that much like Eric, I was really a stickler for following exactly what they told me to do for the interview process, which maybe we'll talk about in a little bit. I, read the handbook ahead of time, just like really, really carefully, and like did my best to do exactly what they asked for. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's probably a combination of, I think bureaucrats have to follow rules really, really carefully. And so like maybe showing that you can do that is helpful, but probably also transcripts and like background and things. And they look for a variety of different backgrounds. So, there's people that become PMFs are biologists, so like that's another interesting sort of twist to the application process.
Yeah, I think we'll talk more in a minute about I have a follow-up question about that assessment piece. But before that, there was a question, what kinds of efforts are made to support community building amongst the cohort? And are there professional development opportunities that are offered?
Yeah, so there are a lot of professional development opportunities offered. For me, that was one of the best parts of the PMF program. You're required to do, I think it's 80 hours a year of professional development. And there's sort of a variety of ways that you could fulfill that. You could do agency specific training, or you can do kind of PMF trainings more broadly. In terms of kind of community and that sort of thing, in my experience, that was very, very agency specific. There are some agencies that have, like, I think the CDC has like a really sort of structured sort of community building process for their PMFs. The Department of Labor did not have that. It was much, much looser. But that actually sort of gave me an opportunity to kind of get together with other PMFs within the agency. And we've actually now started a PMF affinity group within the agency. So if you come to the DOL, there will be a little bit more structured programming. But that is something that I think is really agency specific, sort of beyond the, 80 hours required leadership training. And that is something that, if you do make it to the finalist stage and start interviewing, definitely ask in interviews how they support their PMFs, what the community is like. If the agency has a current PMF, you can ask to speak to them. I found that really, really helpful when I was interviewing too, just to get a sense of, what that really looks like once you get into the agency and start working.
I definitely talk to current PMFs, whether that's, one of us or like other PMFs in the area where you're targeting. I knew I wanted to be in New York. I was a little less open location wise, just because my family is here. And so I connected with New York PMFs prior to actually becoming a fellow. And that was really, really helpful. I would also say that there are location specific like PMF groups. And so we have a pretty great New York cohort here. And it's been fun getting to know them at like happy hours and Christmas parties and things like that. And that's outside of the agency. But like Alora was saying, it really depends on the agency in terms of internal support. HUD has more of a medium sized PMF cohort. So there's not nothing, but it's not massive. And so they're still kind of fleshing out some of that in some ways, but it's cool to be a part of that as well.
At my agency, there were 3 of us, and I was the first one. So not so much. I was sort of like the pilot project, I guess, of my agency. Hopefully it went well for them. Well, I think it did. As far as community building writ large goes, 2 things. One is there's like a PMF specific leadership development program where you will be stuck with a cohort of people who more often than not are pretty cool. And you'll meet with them over the course of a year. And if you take the effort to get to know them, you'll make some friends. So I keep in touch with a bunch of them, even though the program ended for me like I think 8 months ago at this point. And that's been cool, just to hear what they're getting up to and all that sort of stuff. Mutual support as we push our paperwork through the black box and what have you. And then, again, echoing every agency is different. When I did my rotation at the State Department, they have like monthly newsletters that go out to PMFs. They have an agency-wide PMF Teams channel that's constantly going and posting rotation opportunities internal for the PMFs. It really just varies quite a bit.
Great. Let's move to talking about the application. So all of the main details are on the pmf.gov page. I'm just going to pull up the 2025 application, which did it open today? Yeah, today. And which I will say is a little bit earlier than prior years, which we find is a little, if anyone wants from the fellows want to pass it on, it's a little hard at a school to promote this early when people are just getting back to classes, for those who are still students. So anyway, but it is earlier. It's open for 2 weeks starting today. And so for our fellows, I know we already talked about Laura gave some good advice around how she approached it, the application. Maybe Eric and Anna, thoughts on the application, and we can go back to you, Laura, too. Eric, do you have thoughts on like how did you approach the assessment, and were there any other parts of the application process that you can weigh in on? I mean, some of it's straightforward, right? Like resume, unofficial transcript. You don't need letters of recommendation, which I think makes it easy in a way. Like I always tell people, like, just do this. Like it's not that hard, other than maybe sitting down for that assessment piece. But yeah, what was your takeaway from the process?
Yeah. So to build on your last point, the whole reason I applied is because you were like, it's a pretty light lift. And so thank you for that, because it worked out. Virtual high five or whatever. So if I recall, I went back and forth with you quite a bit, iterating over my resume until it was at least serviceable for getting my foot in the door. So I workshopped that with you guys, got that okay. Uploaded my transcript as well. There was some sort of document that I believe you guys provided me with indicating I'd be graduating soon. And then I didn't have an interview, but I did have the personality assessment. And for the personality assessment, it was very much along the lines of you're at a baseball game with your boss and they just bought beer with their government card. What do you do? Do you call them out? They give you a suite of options. And there should be up on the PMF portal a guide that tells you what they're looking for, just generally. And they'll have some example questions and answers there for you to give you a decent flavor of how it works. And my understanding is it's also similar to the Foreign Service Officer test, because they have a personality test that is pretty similar. So if you look at their study materials, that might help you as well. I can't guarantee that, but that's what I've been told. So for me, it was really just making sure my approach was aligned with what it sounded like they were expecting. So I submitted that, buttoned it all up. I want to say there were a couple of short essays as well, which was like describe a time you faced challenges, how did you overcome it, and what have you. Wrote those up. I gave myself enough time so it wasn't like last minute, so that we can like edit it and everything. And then submitted it and waited for a few months, and then got the email when I was out at lunch with Michael Feller, who used to work on the Washington semester program and a bunch of other fellowship stuff for Baruch. So that was kind of cool.
And just to underscore this point, because Laura said for the assessment piece, she just kind of did the second time what was not what she thought was expected, but what she felt was true. And then for her, but it sounds like, because I think this is like the hardest part to understand,
Yeah. So
did it versus what you thought was right, but also what you thought that they wanted. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was weird, right? Because I was like self-employed for however long, like 10 years, right? I don't think I'd ever worked like a big job around a ton of other people. So like in terms of like workplace dynamics, I sort of defaulted to I'll just give them what they want because what do I know about it? And it turned out that that was the right approach for me, which may not always be the right approach, right? Because Alora took an entirely different approach and that worked for her. So I wish I could provide more clarity for that, but I can't.
Yeah, makes sense. But it's good for people to know that you didn't have a traditional workplace background.
Yeah. I did not.
Yeah. Anna.
Yeah, I think OPM prides itself on being a little tight-lipped on how this all works, to be honest. So I can't offer a whole lot more than what's already been said in terms of the initial assessment. I would say that I approached it more like Alora. I tried to answer truthfully. I was kind of paranoid that they would I don't know, figure out that I wasn't answering truthfully somehow. And so I was like, let me just answer this the way I actually would answer it. And yeah, I think the actual application doesn't take that long. And so I would echo what Suzanne has said and just do it because you never know what's going to happen. Like, I think overall it's like an hour and maybe a half, maybe 2 hours altogether. As long as you have all the elements, as long as you have your resume done, you have your, your unofficial transcript with the date of your projected graduation, you should just apply. The last thing I will say is that a federal resume looks a lot different than a not federal resume. And I was not aware of that fact. And so I would also say look up what a federal resume should look like, because that can really help you in the long run, mostly in the more like the job application process. But don't be trying to keep your resume to 2 pages. A federal resume is like 6, I mean, at least. So.
Just gonna paste in there. Oh, it's not gonna let me paste that much information. What they say is actually that you don't need a federal resume, that it can be any format.
Okay.
So
then you should ignore me and do what they say.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I have worked with enough students who, I would say more students that I've seen are not using a federal resume for the PMF. But that doesn't mean, I guess the point is you can do either, that you're not going to be penalized. I don't know. I mean, it's a good point that in general, a federal resume is longer, and that's what people in the federal government are used to looking at. But I've seen plenty of, yeah, and I don't know, Eric and Alora, did you apply with a federal resume? I don't think you did.
No. So my initial resume that I applied to the program with was a one-pager. And then once I got in, I worked with one of Baruch's prior PMFs to turn it into a federal resume, which was what started getting me interviews. I found that immensely helpful because one, up until like a month or two before I applied to the PMF program, I didn't even have a regular resume, and then I had to completely rewrite it and turn it into a 3-page thing to go from there.
Yeah, I also applied with sort of my normal resume pre-government, which was like, I worked in communication, so it was like very designed, 1 page. And the federal resume is essentially like a Microsoft Word document with like no design, nothing, just like blocks of text. So I applied with my sort of non-federal resume, and I think I actually applied for most of the once I became a finalist, I applied for most of my jobs with that resume. But then I found that I was tailoring it so much because of the range of positions that I was applying to, that I then went to the federal resume because I found that so much easier to sort of edit, and worked with that, I think, for kind of like my last round of actual job applications once I had been accepted to the program.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, just to clarify, I did apply with a regular resume, but I think in the long run, it will serve you to have a federal resume, at least for the application portion, the job application portion.
Yeah, if you become a finalist, right? Yeah, if you kind of, this concept of federal resume is new, I put in the chat a link to our career resources page, and if you click on resumes, you'll see it in there. And most people, I think, make a federal resume on usajobs.gov because they have a resume builder. And so basically you're plugging in information and it's going to spit out a version of a federal resume that you can then customize even more. Is that how you all did it with the resume builder?
Yeah, I use the resume builder.
I wound up not, but I used what they look for on the resume builder, like the fields as a guide. So like they want the hours per week you work and your salary and all that stuff, which is not something I normally would have put on like my own resume prior to, like hours per week worked and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's one of the big differences. Anna, can you talk to us about the semifinalist round? So basically what's happening now is we've had they'll announce at some point in the late fall or early January semifinalists, and then those semifinalists do an interview. Can you tell us about that interview process?
Yeah, but I would also say that I feel like they change the process every year. So like take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, so I applied in September. I think I found out I was a semifinalist in October or something like that. And then you can sort of choose a date for your finalist interview. And I remember choosing a date just after I finished my classes in December. The interview is meant to be blind, and so it means that you share very little information about yourself during the interview. Mine was over the phone, and the interviewers also share very little information about themselves. So if it's the same, prepare yourself for a very bizarre interview. And so there is, as I mentioned, a handbook about preparing for this interview. Read it cover to cover like 3 times and just do exactly what it says to do. That is how I prepared. And also know that at the end of the interview, you may or may not know how well you've done. It is such a bizarre interview when it's that blind that I walked out of it truly thinking like, this could have been great, or I could have bombed and I won't know until they announce. And they don't really give you feedback. So yeah, it's a strange process to be honest, but it worked out, and I did the best that I could to be truthful and to follow exactly what they were asking for.
Thank you. Yeah, so it looks like you're right, 4 to 6 weeks. So to me, it's another argument for just applying. It's like you go ahead and apply in this 2-week window, and then you kind of forget about it for 4 to 6 weeks, and then you find out if you're a semifinalist. So you know relatively quickly whether you're moving on to the next round. And even to become a semifinalist, I think is still prestigious. Like sometimes people put on their resume that they were PMF finalists. I mean, and I think you could put semifinalist, maybe. Even if you don't, because some people become a PMF finalist and they never get a placement or they do something different, but it's still an honor to be selected. Any questions for our speakers about applying or about the program? And I don't know if you all noticed, I put this Google Doc, I'll put it in again. If you are not graduated yet and are applying this cycle, you will want to fill this out because our Director of Academic Advisement is going to be generating letters probably later this week for everyone who says they're applying and needs a letter. So take a look at that, because you'll get automatically disqualified if you don't if you didn't graduate yet, because Baruch transcripts don't have your date of graduation. So Academic Advisement will certify you are expected to graduate and therefore eligible. But yeah, any questions about the process? Or this is your chance. Chinu.
Chinwei, hi. No worries, no worries. This is somewhat of a two-parter, but I just want to make sure that I don't remember if people mentioned this, but I wanted to know, once you became a finalist and you start sort of the job interview process, just how arduous is the process of looking for a position? And if you remember, like, how long did it take between knowing you were a finalist and actually like getting your position?
I'll start this one. So I found out I was a finalist, I think December of 2021. I started applying for positions, I think, in like February. There was a job fair in May of 2022. And that's how I found my current position. So I talked to the right person there and wound up having a more formal interview like a week or so later. And then they started the process of onboarding me. So the way federal onboarding works is substantially different than it, it's slower and there's more hoops. So like a month and a half after that, I received a notice that I had a tentative job offer. So that's like late June at that point. So I accept it. And then like a month after that, I have a security clearance interview. And so I do that. And then I receive my final job offer like late August. And then my first day was September 26th. So it takes a while. It's not going to happen immediately, but it will happen. The thing people tell me is government works at a deliberate pace. I think that is correct.
Yeah, my process was a little bit quicker. So I found out I was a finalist. It was the week of Thanksgiving in 2020, so end of November. And I kind of started applying right away. I got a few offers in like February, March that I ended up declining. And then got the job that I ended up taking. I think I got the offer like early to mid-April. And then I started a month later. I started in May. So I think it really depends. I think one big difference, I very much did not want a security clearance. I didn't want to go through that process. So I think because I didn't need a security clearance, I just did sort of the standard like public trust background check. That definitely helped with the timing of things too. I know if you are in a position where you need a higher level clearance, that can also sort of drag the process out a little bit. And then in terms of the arduousness of applying, it was kind of a while ago for me, so I don't fully remember. I don't think it was too bad. It was really just like, I think the hardest part for me was figuring out like, okay, is this a job I think I would actually want to do? Sometimes it's hard to tell from the job description, but the actual applications, I think most of the time it was like sort of filling out a brief form and sending your resume. There were some jobs that had like follow-up questionnaires or sort of other pieces to it. But for the most part, wasn't too bad. I left the job that I had been in January, I think, and was focused just solely on applying for PMF jobs for a few months, just because I was able to do that in the way sort of my timing worked out. But yeah, I think it's just something where, if you are working a full-time job while you're applying, you can set aside, an hour or two every few days or a week or whatever it is to just kind of work on the applications.
I wish my timeline was as fast as y'all's, but it was not. I think it does depend year to year, just based on how backed up they can be with security clearances. But my timeline actually echoed Eric's a little bit more closely, but yours was even faster, which is impressive because I'm pretty sure your security clearance is higher than mine. Yeah, I found out I was a finalist in February, started applying, job fair in May. I don't think it was particularly arduous to apply, but I will say I did tailor my resume to each application, and I applied to a lot of jobs, like probably more than 40. And because I just wanted to make sure I was getting the best one for me. You don't probably need to be that crazy, but I wanted to like apply broadly. I really wanted to be in New York, and I was starting mid-career, so I didn't really want a GS9. And so I applied for the job that I currently have in March, I believe is when I had the application. They gave me an offer letter in June. But I then had to do the background check process, which actually took 4 months. So I didn't start until October.
Alrighty, thank you. One last question. What is a GS9? I know it's a pay scale thing, but what
Yeah.
is that? Yeah.
So you come into the PMF program as either a GS9, 11, or 12. And usually, if you have a master's and you're fresh out of school and you don't have any sort of job background, you're going to get a GS9. If you have a PhD or higher, you are eligible for a GS11 or 12. But if you have job experience, like some sort of career that is somewhat related to the field that you're applying to, you can make the case for a higher pay level than a GS9, even though you don't have a PhD. So just like keep that in mind when you're applying. And basically, you would apply for the job. They would say, you're approved for this job at a GS9 or GS11 or GS12. That's the point at which you would argue with them and say, like, actually, I think I'm qualified for a GS11 or a GS12 or whatever.
And I did that just as an FYI. I was offered a GS9 and then talked myself into an 11. So it is definitely possible. And if you get there, more than happy to talk about how I did that.
Yeah, I would advocate for that as well.
Yeah.
And could you, like, within each GS level, there's steps, right? So if like, yeah, I guess I just wanted to make that clear. It wasn't like a one step, but I don't know if they pick a step within the level.
You usually come in as your first step, and then if you weren't leveling up each year, your second year you would be a step 2 or step 3, whatever. But another thing you can do is ask them to match your salary if you can show that, and they might bring you in as like, say no, you're only qualified for GS9, but we'll match your salary. Then maybe they'll bring you in as a GS9 step 3 just to match the salary. But arguing that, it does add some time to the time frame, just to like be aware, like arguing any of this is going to add a few weeks.
Right. Yeah, I put in the chat the list of the finalists, so it's useful to see that there's many people who were not appointed yet, but then you can see where those that were appointed. And this is the list that we look at when like it goes up one day and then everyone's kind of frantically looking and seeing like which school has which finalists, and it's exciting. Any other either questions and then I'm gonna ask for final comments from our alumni, but and as Eric said, we had worked with him on his resume. So that is one piece that we can help with. And actually, we're happy to just give a quick, like, looks good too. So just email us if you're wanting a second eye, because that's pretty easy for us. We're happy to make sure if you're going to use a standard or either version of the resume, we can take a quick look. That's the piece we can help out with the most. And then those letters I mentioned for those applying. But yeah, if there's no more questions, I'll do a final comments. Any last things you want to say? We'll start with you, Anna.
I would just really advocate in the application process, like once you become a finalist, to reach out to other PMFs that are already finalists. Like, definitely start that networking process. You will find out more about the job by talking to PMFs in those agencies than you will any other way, probably. And so that's a great way to figure out if something's a good fit. It won't necessarily like get you the job or anything like that, but it will help you to like understand what the work is. And also like whether or not you want to be a part of that agency. And just remember, like, they want you too. And so you're interviewing them as well.
Eric?
I tend to agree with Anna. You are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, number one. To reach out to PMFs that work in your target agencies. They're pretty much always very happy to talk you through the process because they've been in your shoes, right? And occasionally, if you make a good impression, they'll pass your resume around as well. So even if there isn't something specifically posted in the job portal, it is another way to get some recognition and perhaps secure an interview. So don't be shy or afraid to reach out. DC is a very, hey, let's go grab some coffee town. And even if it's virtual coffee, people will by and large be open to doing it with you.
Laura?
Yeah, I echo everything Anna and Eric said. I think my sort of couple of final parting thoughts would be one, just a reminder that you are eligible for 2 years after you graduate to apply. So I graduated in December 2018 and became a finalist Thanksgiving 2020. So I really snuck it in under the wire. But just remember that, if you do apply this year and you don't happen to get it, I really do encourage applying again, because I'm proof positive that it can work out the second time if it doesn't the first. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, like I said, it's a really, really great program. And to kind of piggyback off what Anna and Eric said about, them wanting you to, it's really difficult to hire people in the federal government. Like through the traditional pathways, it takes a long time, it's expensive, it's arduous, and the PMF program is like a shortcut for hiring managers. So if they can hire someone from the PMF program or someone from a traditional pathway, it's much, much easier for them to hire a PMF. So you have more leverage than, I certainly felt like I had more leverage than I had ever had in my career before or since. So just do keep that in mind and just, really make sure that you are getting the job that you want, you're getting the answers you want, and know that, if you are a PMF, you really do have a lot of leverage in the process.
And yeah, and our office is here to help with, if you make it to the semifinalist round, we will definitely be reaching out. And I know in the past, some fellows have, some of our alumni fellows have also spoken to those in the semifinalist round or other phases of the process. So there's a lot of resources at Baruch to help you. And I will say we have thus far the best track record. I've been in my job for 10 years, and we have the best track record within CUNY of PMF finalists. And so we just want everyone to apply. I think the more of our students and alumni who apply, the greater the chance that we're going to continue to be turning out PMF finalists from the Marxe School and also Baruch. Might be some Weissman people on here now. Last year, it was one Zicklin graduate who was a finalist and one Marxe graduate. And yes, career services are available to alumni. So feel free to reach out to us. We do meet with alumni one-to-one. I think that's, yeah. So thanks. Please join me in thanking Anna, Eric, and Alora for being here today. And I know Anna is co-hosting a CUNY PMF presentation. How will that differ from today's? Like, is there some, if people really, what is that going to be? I'll put the link in the chat, but you tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, we're hosting a CUNY PMF, prospective PMF webinar on September 12th. It's going to be in the evening, I think 6:30 p.m. And it's a panel. And so I'm going to start off with a little bit of information and a few softball questions for panelists. But I've put together a panel of, I believe, 6 PMFs from the New York area that are going to be available mostly to answer questions for folks that are interested in applying for the program and just encouraging more CUNY participation, because it really, I think what Suzanne is saying is absolutely true. The more people that apply, the more there's going to be CUNY representation. And I think that's really, really important in the federal government. And so I would, once again, just encourage you to apply and come to the panel interview if you're interested, or at least sign up so you can get the recording.
Thank you. Yeah, we will be sending around this recording if there's anything you want to go back to. And great to see everyone. I'm glad so many people were able to show up today. And we look forward to having you all apply, and feel free to reach out with any follow-up questions about the process. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.